work of Jen Bervin, I find myself evoking a reversible logic, as if every descriptive phrase were a palindrome and I should give you both sides. She is a poet and visual artist whose thinking works in and across spaces. She creates images to be read and words to be seen. Reading is writing, and defacing a text is a creative act. I mean by deface the taking away of a subject's wholeness, its autonomy. I mean removing it and moving it, as in, let's go this way, you're coming with me, we're in this together. Our faces orient us to each other, to the ground and sky, and so to deface is to make those relative, up or down, left or right, left of right. The act of writing is a route, a way through a space and a way to be in it. We ponder ambiguous phrases such as the desert sky a desert, and the desert a sky. The color of the ground is blue. We are at elevation, or to use the title of one of her books, we are under what is not under. Jen's books are also not books in the ordinary sense. Most of them are artist books, so the production of the book object, its outside appearance, is as personal to her as the words or images inside. And because many of these are available online or only online, it's also fair to say that her unit of thought is not the book but the page. And as much as her work is hand-produced by her, with all of the sewing and painting, she is also a poet of the machine. Both the sewing machine and the typewriter talk in these poems. And yet she said of her most recent book, The Desert, "My sewn poem is narrated by the air." In one of my very favorite books of poetry from the last decade, her book called A Non-Breaking Space, she quotes Einstein as saying that, quote, "We cannot use the same thinking that caused the problem to solve the problem." I take this to be in part a reflection on her own intermedia practice. A medium, whether a book or a page or an art object or a quilt, is a means to communication, but it is also a problem, and the complex experience we have when we read, see, or listen to her work comes, I think, from her never using the same thinking that caused the problem to solve the problem. Jen is probably most well known as a poet of erasure, and this is true enough as a description of her technical approach. She usually works with one or more source texts, written but also visual ones, and either she quotes from them at length or works directly on the text to make it hers in a sense. In the notes that she adds to her poems, she has articulated a paradoxical view of her relationship to source texts. She has said on the one hand that, quote, "When we write poems, the history of poetry is with us, pre-inscribed in the white of the page." But on the other hand, she is quoted with enthusiasm this Laura Riding comment about Gertrude Stein, quote, "None of the words Miss Stein uses has ever had any experience. They are no older than her use of them," end quote. She thus puts into play questions of ownership, who owns the words we use, whether owning them is as suggestive and complicated as owning a cloud in the sky. My own feeling about her practice of erasure, based on phrases and ideas in her poems, is that erasing is not a destructive act, but a breaking open of something. And because her aesthetic practice puts the creative self under erasure, we should feel fortunate that we have her here with us today. In A Non-Breaking Space, she wrote, in a voice close to Dickinson's, "If you say, 'I am I,' our culture goes with you. If you say, 'I am nobody,' you have to think, 'Who are you?' without your body, without yourself." Unquote. Dickinson would have rejected our visit to Chapman. Luckily, Jen did not. And I'm so happy to see her and have her here today. So.
Hello. Can you hear me okay? That was the most beautiful introduction anyone's ever written. It was so perceptive. Thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm so happy to be here, and it's so nice to meet a bunch of people who are actually reading the things that I just sort of cast out into the ether online, because I don't know who reads it or what effect it has, and it's really meaningful to hear what's happening in that space. So thank you. It's the reason that I do accept to come to Chapman, and the reason I always want to do any school visits, because that's what I care about. I'm going to read from two books today. One, The Desert, which is done, and one, the Niagara book, which is undone. And I'm not sure what that means, but I'm going to read this chapter 2 from The Desert. And if you just came in, it's a book a sewn poem situated within a book by John Van Dyke. And I scanned his 1901 edition. There's been a Land Classics edition that's out and is still in print right now. That's a great read and easy to come by. It's slightly enlarged, so there's a very slight difference. On the level of visual perception, when you're reading the lines, the slightly smaller 1901 has a very different effect than the slightly larger, 85 edition. So that was why I chose it. And I don't know if Van Dyke wrote the marginal comments like antelopes, or if those were written by an editor. But I love them, and that was sort of what initially drew me in visually. And like with Nets, that sort of page architecture of the poem and that evidence that it's a poem by another author is present visually. So it's really clear that it's not, that there are two authors on one page, and sometimes more. So the artist's book is all sewn. So every line in the 130 pages is sewn over with thread, and there are 40 copies of the book. And it's my hope that there will be a trade edition of it, so that it's something you can soon put in your pocket, or with comfort put on a table with coffee and read. But that might be a little while yet. If afterwards you want to come up and see the book, I'm happy to show it. I'll handle it because it's a little fragile and a little sensitive. So here we go. Chapter 2, The Make of the Desert. How many people sew, machine sew? That's a good number. So if you don't sew with a machine, there are some things that happen in the text that you should know about. One is that the needle is like stabbing the paper day in, day out when I'm sewing the text. The other is that the way you get the foot of the machine to go forward is to press a foot pedal. So there's some reference to that action too. So the brazen spear points are that act as well. So there's a lot of reference to sewing and the act of sewing in this chapter. Chapter 2, The Make of the Desert. The reality shows the idea, reading strange seas. Through these shallow channels time called me, called the lack of it new. It is possible to imagine the whole face changed. All the gentler qualities missing. It is a show of teeth one feels. There not a thing moves save you. How is it possible? You have seen the open field. One place was cut out from some other and always showing. A spirit of restlessness seizes them, and so it happens that the surface is hardly enough to hold. The reason is plain enough. Air above it, air from without. This desert, one can feel it. Through loopholes I am prepared to point out. You feel them softly, yet about you they cut. There is the slow erosion, a gnawing at the face walls. Nature heaved up these to fulfill a purpose, she is now taking them down. Remainders are likened to parallel lines and the fingers of a hand. Say where one leaves off and the other begins. See my attention to this. There is no hour composed of equal parts. They spread into thin sheets, leaving scarce a rack behind. Perhaps none of it remains. Perhaps one meets with a very rare occurrence. These are the poets. To tell the truth, they are wretched little mud holes. Their pockets are strange catch basins. Wherever you go on the desert, you meet with time. For here are many kinds, aqueous and igneous, and everywhere the white. There pushed into windrows, readily as glaciers, things sometimes, quote, just happen. The movement is going on continuously, irrespective of what is called beginning. The depressed foot finally slips down, has entered. Yet this is really many things, many different materials. You may spend days and weeks studying the makeup of these desert acres of tiny blocks. One can imagine it made, the line of sporadic appearance. It often turns blue. And yet your horse does not go knee-deep in light. You may see small particles or find them a part of a bird's nest. They have quiescent force, rising as they do of things deep-based. They have needles that are lifted, brazen spear points. Watch into the blue of the fold its veilings, attuned to the key of air, there, questioning. There's this great Agnes Martin documentary where she's sort of, she's in her 80s and she's just huffing and puffing in front of a canvas in New Mexico. And she said, I was born with a tiny sword. and she said after that it was all adjustment. But I always think of that when I think of that point. Anyway. I should say that when I was writing The Desert, it was all composed by sewing machines. So all the drafts were sewn, and there were many of them. I wanted the process to affect the writing really deeply, so that's how it happened. There's this old system of writing or map making called kipu, like knotting of thread, and it's a complicated system often with color, but I found a new system for the book to read because I would always get lost in the Niagara book because there are all these it's like a strange book. It eludes me every time I go to find something, I can't find it, but now I have a new thread system that's fantastic, so I know where to start. So I'm going to start with one page that I wrote almost sort of in response to a question someone asked me, and then a brief introduction to the author, and then I'll read straight through. Even though I'm reading the whole book, it doesn't take very long. It's probably like 15 minutes. Okay. The whole book that I've done, I think. Anyway. There is so much noise, so much tumult, a cautious person would care to navigate particularly. A tone beside his own utterance. To listen to the river perfectly, give me calm. Hands, let nature take her course in the world, the very pith. Part 3. A few pages about B. This was originally about buffalo in the book. you who've lived in Buffalo. All visitors see something of B. In the morning, see the manuscripts. In the afternoon, the park, the red lines and square. Strangers, spacious, the river. B seen most easily by taking one of the small boats, B and being, single and double, most effectively, most effectively. 2 houses in B, the private architecture. Of a special interest is a tablet, of a similar tablet, to which the public are welcome. The interior is also swan, erected in. The Niagara Book. 1. One well-used day with the sun bright enough to start, the rapids, the sky, the brink, the plunge, the distance, your thoughts. I have been the air throat, the going on inside it, molten silver. 2. Everywhere, the genius of place. You come out of the house full of attractions, slip on one, you brink. The horses, the white horses. 3. You come back. Here, dear, I know it is you. Horse, being, cloud, such enormous outlines and infinite. Convergence. Both poem and place. If the river describes its love, you are shown, and the tossing is picturesque and beautiful. There are a lot of things I'm not reading in here too. If you look at the book, there are different footnotes and exclamations and things that are happening too. Any mass of shifting, is it buzzy, the mic? Mm-hmm. Any mass of shifting spray will hold, a vast and prodigious cadence its parallel. Island and island, there's hardly another. Its music is by no means only accompaniment. A little nearer one of its curving faces, leap. A small bridge quivers, gives again. You, a glassy shoot, the parting divides its mass quietly, bewildering. I know of nothing that will leave so sweet. 5. To be. Unfit utterly to say a word. Niagara even, or some other, the distance is about. Throw a stone over, drawn down its center will not emerge for days. A thread between 2 panoramas. Dramatic incidents. How the human mind, impelled by unusual conditions, is led to applaud the living. It was, is, river, and a body falls. Be the shore feeling the boat. Midnight cut her ropes, she formed in the extreme, the scene being one. Her bow right into the rapids, she was a full head of steam. Fatal swim. Right on time he left his hotel with nothing on but a pair of red trunks. His stroke was beautiful, he reached the fiercest part. Thousands went by and some said, it's death, determined to show the world confidence of his own. He will be remembered as never having disappointed a gathering. I may be marked. I signed noon, capsized, was held there, stood on end. There's a nice picture in this one of the people who cross Niagara on a wire. Moment. There's some really beautiful amateur photography in the book, which is just protected. J, also known as B, falls through the book. 2 air compartments craft a home. B, which B has been. The book, sign B, the river, a machine, a velocipede, a painter stretched, considering a word. Niagara. The 20th century gone over the falls. Small applications for passage were thrown open. The body through the days of hard work, the body. He was one of the small islands, the island known as Island. There is talk and mercy. Niagara, there was a vast amount of thinking they forgot to refasten, the remnant of a pier. This goat was found alive, naming. Experience. The sun was sinking in. Photographs were taken down and disappeared. Letters bearing his name passed through the paper, await. Niagara, first and last. I wrote a life, what is called a life, if not the most memorable in our history, at least of the farthest effect. Nobody arrived in glory. New York, I meant those distant capitals. I should have thought it well to spend my whole substance. I believed the best money in the world. I thought letters I never printed. I was wandering about the streets a horse. I forgot who I was. I would have written in English if. 2. The pictures break ranks and tumult, going into the throat. My sense of it first, my sense of it last, was Niagara I am otherwise, I correspond. I drew from a little table in it where I wrote my vast letters. 3. The fall affected my nerves the way it did. There were a variety of brides visible to me. I vanished again, and I believe I saw numbers. By a sort of affinition, I fell in with their work. I liked them. I was reaching out. Niagara, I am still a little shaken. Love was $1 in those days. I was willing to waste mine, to be honest. Four. If there is agony there, it moves the beholder, but it itself does not move. I thought I could work up in my letters, waited my turn among those on their necks over the edge, made a note of this. Strange, no. 5. Do they still take people to see a fall? They used to do that if you paid them $0.25. I saw Niagara then, not the body. Niagara, there are so many marvels you learn upon your person. I remember, I paid my $0.25. Things linger, and it is not always from frugality. 6. Take this river, and not quite I. The name, cross that too, a thread. The silk fleshings falter and sway. I made some vague notes. B came into sight again. I stood where I could see his earthly personality. The very most intelligent feet in the world. A delicate confidence, wittingly, imaginably, an immense consolation those feet be upon them. He came to something and began to be believed. I could say to myself there were no bottoms in everyone about me. I did not wholly lose patience. I was like any other eye, where it having been made. I hastened to send a whole letter to paper. All my anxiety concerning the letters I wrote, where I stopped, I baffled. 7. The flowers which roar had black plumes in them that droop, a sort of sigh often known in print. I never object to the paper, an object lesson. I should still prefer the pen, would have built the ice, the river blocked with huge squares and oblongs. I look down upon it all, these small black figures crawling over it. Niagara we penetrated, a weird reluctance, the glazed remoteness in our own cups. The particles along the brink were like a wilding growth of violets, those candied violets you see at the confectioner's. It's two in the trees, which two little seas, present the mind, sang his songs, an interesting world with all the peculiarities. Such scenery as me, hours amidst the miniature productions of this world, that delicious absorption which enthusiasm alone can produce. Oh, when a great subject is dealt with by the human mind, we get a double lesson. Falls, I whisper it to you. I am meta, I am translated, I am a wooden spoon, a fat weed, a stalk, a stone, velocity and immensity, sung with feeling, through you, most infinite. Sing it over again, so double. The full wonder. Wild flowers, wild in passing behind, the gush of silvery light, brighter where they fell. Happiness stamped upon my heart. That's it. Thank you. So, what do we do now?
I think I said you wouldn't force discussion on you, but I have a question about your book hunting and bookstores and finding old books. And is that something you like to do?
Yeah.
And it's getting harder, or is it?
I want to say this way. The student of mine used to say, "I love blue." He was, he was fantastic. But yeah, I love books. I love looking for them. I love, everything about them. What they do. All that space. In Chicago, it was $7 as is, a first edition, and it was water stained. And I take it. It's just this thing I take with me everywhere. I built a special pocket into my bag for my correction fluid, and it's nice. I think I do a lot of pretty solitary work, but it's so nice to get on the train in New York City and work on it, and have people say, "What are you doing?" And then you get to talk to someone like, "I'm writing a poem." And they're like, "What?" Just like these little exchanges where, things are being made around people. Like I often knit or whatever in the subway. So it's not like I'm not doing things other times, but it's interesting to engage in that kind of space of public making. I like that. But, I think I started this book because I was just so sad. I didn't know what else to do, when I started it. This was 3 years ago. And I think it's pretty sad. A lot of the poem is pretty sad. But it was just like a consolation to me, I think, when I first started working on it. And I had no sense that it would ever be something I would read. It was just for me when I started. So it's a good way to start anything, I think. Well, differently with different books. I think that the prose is super resistant in terms of erasure. To try to work within a Shakespearean sonnet is it's a single page poem, so you don't have to worry about what's on the page before. I did think about that a lot when I put the book together, but when I was in the process of working poem by poem, I wasn't responsible to that. So grammar won't let you do things. Placement won't let you do things. A given page won't let you do things. There are sections in this book that I just won't erase because I like them too much. Like, there's a section on the history of Niagara that's just so great. Or, like, there's a section by Mark Twain that's written comically and it's kind of horrible. Section about the Garden of Eden that's sort of the spoof. And I couldn't do anything with that either. So, they have, I think there's a lot of, we were talking about this earlier, like, with working with another text, it sounds like you're exerting a lot of force on a text, but once you start doing it, it's exerting its force on you, and you're just trying to, do what you can in a certain way. But I do have certain rules for myself sometimes, like with the sewing, when I was composing, I couldn't have something back if I sewed over it, so there was a certain, it made me be more present, because there were a lot of times I was like, I flew over something that was something I didn't want to fly over, and so it really forced me to pay really close attention and slow down and read better. And a lot of times I'll go back to work in here and I can't. I just wind up reading again, so I go with the hope of writing poems, and sometimes that happens. But it's like a few years of taking it with me a bunch of places and trying,
I'm wondering along the process how often you might have a page that you really like that you've done, and then you come back over it and you see something else, or how often you decide to go with a whole different way of looking at the page.
I don't know, I hope a lot. Yeah.
Just when you're fully satisfied with it, is that when you decide your work with that page is done?
It's so hard to say.
I know.
I hear you so satisfied, and you hear that Lou Welch poem. It's like, ooh, I'm so satisfied. It's like, it's sort of a menacing line. I just love it. But it's like, I don't know. It's very hard to put into words how you know something is. Yeah, this is still restless. When I read it, I hear things. But it's closer.
I think that answers the question.
Somebody once said, work is never finished, it's abandoned.
I don't know. I don't think that's true for me so much. Like, I think when I came to poetry, I gave up abandoning things. To be truthful, I was working in video installation, and it was nearly killing me. It was so much work, and it was so much. Nothing. So much mess at the end. I had all these sort of leftover installations and leftover projects, and they made me miserable, to be truthful. I felt like what I ended up with was not what I wanted to end up with. And so I started thinking a lot about like Gordon Matta Clark's work, which is just making a cut into an existing building to let light through, or to frame things differently, to deal with the matter that was there in a very, very simple, intelligent way, and opening up an existing space. And I thought about a gesture like that, and I thought that's more what I want to do, and it seemed like poetry was always that kind of space. So that's what I did. I just read for a long time until I figured out what else to do. So, and then when I did start making work again, I made sure it was work that I wanted to have around, that that I wanted to stay. So it was a real change in the pace and also the sort of tenor of activity for me. And that was, I think, 96. So it's been a while now. Also, when you're going to spend a few years in a work, and really full years, you want to make sure that it's something you care about enough to want around at the end. So I have a lot of time to think about that when I'm making the stuff that I make.
I'm interested in your book art, and I don't know if you could describe the process somewhat.
About the desert?
Well, the content, but yes, but then also the process of the physical process of how you make it.
Well, I tend to work sort of reactively. Like, I'll do one project and it'll make me feel a certain way. Like, a lot of editioning will make me want to do a one-of-a-kind thing that's scanned and not a physical, something that's online, or having something online and then feeling like people aren't reading it, and they don't care about it enough makes me want to make a thing that they have, or making a book that's like super expensive and only in libraries makes me want to have like a thing that I make for free and give away, or so there are all these things that are not necessarily about production that influence how I feel about what I want to make in terms of the book, or sort of surrounding issues of production. But somebody who cares a lot about a historic record of writing or the ways texts are presented to us through time, I think I've taken a lot of care with things like the red box to show how much process is integral to writing itself, how we understand something that's been erased or typed over, a stray mark that appears on the page can affect a reading. So like with the red box, I composed sewn fragments that were typed, erased, done on the back of sort of errant drawings for the project itself. And when I went to edition it, I did it exactly as I'd made it. So every kind, if it was cream paper, I used cream paper. If it was torn, I tore it. If it was scissored, I scissored it. If it was typed over and then erased, I would type over it and erase. So all of it was just as exact as I could get it. And the book was so much about the limits of human precision. So it was, on one sense, I was trying to like go to crazy ends to make a certain point about the values of producing things the way you made them. But on the other hand, it was an impossibility that I could never do that, because you can't. We're imperfect machines. And so the book is a lot about Glenn Gould, who tries to be a machine and is humming and conducting and sitting on his low chair, and the chair is creaking, and yet his playing is like mechanically perfect and faster than anyone's done it. And so, and Wittgenstein is talking about trying to get more and more precise about language, talking about the color red and a chair, and it's like getting more and more emotional. And so I became really excited and interested in the ways that artists like sort of chase after one idea and can't help but sort of enact another. I got a long way away from your question, but like with this book, I wanted it to be sewn so bad. I didn't want to make a facsimile of it to start. I wanted to do an edition that was all sewn, to have that reading experience be completely on the record as the experience I intended. And there's something about, especially literary manuscripts, where that's often assumed to be not the case, that the process is considered to be a transitional space and one that disappears when things go to print. And I think I fight against that a lot. At the same time, I want to try an edition people can read. You have this excitement of doing something the way you envision it, and then the sadness of spending years working on something that very few people can read. So there are all sorts of issues involved in the questions of books and how to make them, and it can't be online because it's so important to have two sides, to see the You know, when you, the light is so nice. So, like these little threads here, they pop up and they sort of like, they get really lively, you know? So you have this experience of like going out in search of the word, and you can sort of see the text behind it, and so that there are all these things that happen in this experience that are so valuable, and it's made to be seen in sequence, and it's made to be seen, you know, with all its physicality going on. But then when I think about sort of taking it into a trade edition, then I'm in a 2-color zone, which is expensive, and I'm in a 2-sided zone, which means a book, not a digital thing. And so all of these things sort of, but it's that way all along with the book. Like, because I'm sewing, I have to choose a paper that can withstand all of that perforation. And because I'm perforating, you know, because I'm sewing paper, I have to choose a thread that will cooperate with that. Like cotton doesn't work. And then the color in relation to the black of the text behind it changes. So you had to, like, there's a lot of calibrating with the blue, and then the binding structure is based on the folio, because I want the front and the back to always read in sequence, so it's a single folio each time. And I wanted it to be basically rectangular, so the binding structure was figured out for that. And all the way along, everything is sort of, it's like a little ecosystem, like, you know. Yeah.
So just to clarify, I might have missed it. The sewing is, you're using a sewing machine to create the letters and the words?
No, the book is printed. First I scanned in the pages of the 1901 landscape, so it's two up per page. So it's a bigger page than, it's as if you're you're looking at the open book every time you turn the page. And that's digitally printed. And again, like, we couldn't afford the time of letterpress, and we couldn't afford it, period. So we did it digitally, like it's printed with a laser, not a laser printer, but like a, you know, an HP. It's not fancy, and it's not super stable, but because all of the text is sewn over, it's pretty well protected because the paper itself is so strong and so archival. So it's like it really is all hanging in a particular balance, and other papers didn't print like that one. So, I mean, literally, like, there's a day where you go to the paper store and you get 12 papers that you think you like, and you take them home and you print them all and you sew them all, and then you take them to your studio floor and you crumple them up and you rub them around the dirt, and then you look at them and think about, like, how it's going to last. And then you choose the one that will last, and then you call the paper maker and say, can you make 1,500 sheets by the 20th? And they say, you're crazy. And then they help you, you know. So, mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. Are you going to show people a little bit if they come up?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. And there's some books. There's copies of Nets over there if you don't have a copy. Thank you so much.
Thanks.